So get a songbook and turn to page number 496. That sounded pretty quiet, didn't it? Now we're going. 496. I would love to tell you what I think of Jesus, since I found in him a friend so strong and true. I would tell you how he changed my life completely. He did something that no other friend could do. No one ever cared for me like Jesus. There's no other friend so kind as he. No one else can take the sin and darkness from me. Oh, how much he cared for me. Oh, my life was full of sin when Jesus found me. Oh, my heart was full of misery and woe. Jesus placed his strong and loving arms around me, and he led me in the way I ought to go. No one ever cared for me like Jesus. There's no other friend so kind as he. No one else can take the sin and darkness from me. Oh, how much he cared for me. Every day he comes to me with new assurance. More and more I understand his words of love. But I'll never know just why he came to save me, till someday I see his blessed face above. No one ever cared for me like Jesus. There's no other friend so kind as he. No one else can take the sin and darkness from me. Oh, how much he cared for me. Brother Kermit, would you pray for us? Amen. Well, we're adjusting. We're making adjustments. We got a new mic. I've tore up the old one. I preached too long, and the old one wore out. I don't know if that's it or not, but we got a new mic tonight, and so we're working on that. But glad to see everybody here, and I'm glad to be. We singing that song. I thought, you know what? I'm glad to be in the family of God. I see a lot of people out there just living miserable lives today, and they don't know the Lord, and I feel you can't fix it. You can't fix it for them until they get saved. They don't understand, and you're not perfect when you get saved, but just life's better. You got someone there to help you and get things, and I'm not even preaching on that. It's just I like that song, and I was glad we chose that tonight. So what are we going to, this is prayer meeting. That's what we're doing. We got a prayer list somewhere in here, and if you don't have one, we got new ones made this week. Try to update them, see what some things going on. And we slipped over to Putnamville last night, and Brother Bob Sanders, we've not had him here in a couple of years, and he was over there preaching, so we got to visit a little bit with them. And sat in on a revival meeting and seen a few faces over there, some people I knew. Okay, prayer list. We got the new list, so I don't have any kind of other updates that I know of going on here, unless you've got something. I'm looking for my old bulletin. Yes, ma'am?
My friend Carrie Norman, he has
Oh,
jaw cancer,
oh, okay.
and he was in the hospital because they were gonna like take out a piece of bone from some part and put it in his jaw, but I guess they can't do that, and so they sent him home. So there wasn't anything for him to go through.
Hmm.
Carrie Norman.
Perry Norman. Put him on the cancer list. And Perry.
Perry.
P as in Perry. P as in, yeah, P as in Perry. Perry, this is bad when you substitute mail route Perry Norman, 503 South Lafayette. See what I mean? I see names and numbers come to my mind. I said that to a lady one day at Walmart. She said something. I told her address, and her eyes got that big. I said, "I'm not a stalker. I'm a substitute mail." You got to be careful of that. You don't. It's not good to know everybody's address. Yes, ma'am. Yes. And tomorrow was another one, or today was the first one? Okay. Yeah. Diane Holdsapple. Let's put her on the right ends. I had her. I think we had her on the right ends, and then we got a new list. Diane Holdsapple is having cataract surgery today, tomorrow, and then Friday they go back in and see if you can see anything. Yeah. She'll come in here and sit down Sunday and look up here and say, "Man, I didn't know that preacher was so bald." All this time I seen all that fuzzy in my eyes, I thought he had hair. Is that right? I've already forgot her last name. Flick, that's it. Well, that's good. I see another hand somewhere over here. Yes, ma'am? Okay. Okay, so Cheryl is on, she's on list number 4, or 5 somewhere. I say there she is, yeah, Cheryl McKnight. But she comes home from rehab tomorrow. Okay. Talked to Mr. Pitts a little bit this week, or texting. I'm not a texter, but it's easier to contact people when you don't know what they're doing or how they're feeling. But he's getting worse, and he said, I'm trying to think how he said it. He said he's not quite as cheerful as he was for a while. It's kind of tough to do when you're 63 and the doctors pretty well give up on everything and doing anything. So, but he said he's doing all right. But we just need to continue to pray for him and his family. It's a very tough time to go through. Anybody got a story they need to tell while we're waiting on another prayer request? Something going on? Something happening? You want to confess something that you did funny so we can make fun of you? Because if we find out, we will. That's what we do. Somebody actually the other day made fun of me and then apologized. I told him, never apologize for making fun of me. That's what you're supposed to do. That's what we do. We make fun of people. Now, we don't do it in a derogatory way, but we make fun of people. So Never apologize for that. Yeah, that's good. Thing is, he can't hear. He don't know what's going on. You can hear him coming. I actually went through his garage the other day, and Kaylee or so the kids had put them little pop things, put them outside his door, so when you step out of the garage, you hear them all popping everywhere. So that's how we keep track of him. We did have a bell we put around his neck, but okay. If you don't have anything else, hang on to your list, and at the end of the service, we will finish up with a sermon, a short sermon. You get a short sermon if you come on Wednesday, and then we'll finish up, and we'll just spend a few moments praying over that list. You can pray there at your seat when we're done, and we'll move on. If you got your Bibles tonight, open to the book of 2 Chronicles, chapter number 20. Second Chronicles, chapter number 20. Anybody in here that's never been to the mountains? Never been to mountains? Nobody's in here. That's good. Mountains have a way of drawing people. Now, I'm assuming the closest mountain range to us would be the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee. I don't know that, but I would assume that's the closest ones to get to if he's going to take off driving. And I was reading things about it to go along with what I was going to preach here tonight, and there's kind of a pull for people to mountains, I guess. And so I looked it up. Since 2012, the Smoky Mountains has averaged 11.5 million visitors a year. I didn't get, of course, there's a down year there, the COVID year, but in 2019, there was 12,547,000 some odd. In 2022, there was 12,900 some. And 2021 was their record year. They had 14.1 million people go through the mountains. Obviously, there's something about being on a mountain, being in a mountain, however you want to say it, standing on a mountaintop, and that it draws people to the mountains. Now, we took a trip one time to the Rockies, and I don't know how much bigger, but they must be quite a bit bigger than the other mountains, because it seemed like I remember we saw them, and everybody thought in our vehicle, well, we're going to be there in just a couple hours because they're right there. And 5 hours later, they were still right there, and 6 hours later, and we realized those things are big because we've been seeing them for a long time, and we're not getting closer. But then I put gas in the car. We made a little progress out of that. But just something out in mountains, but as great as it is to be on top of mountains like the Smoky Mountains, there is a greater mountaintop experience, and a lot of people just kind of write this off when you talk about. But if you've ever had a mountaintop experience, just being in the presence of God, I don't know how to explain it, and maybe you've never had it. I hope you have, but it's kind of amazing. And sometimes you get in. There's something about you're in the. You don't. I mean, it's not something you work up like some people think. There's some churches they have their meetings and they try to work things up. That's not that. But now I've been in meetings. I was in a meeting once. Can you imagine a meeting that's going so good? No one ever preaches. A Baptist meeting. But things and I was just visiting there and some people began to testify, and people began to cry, and people began to come to the altar, and they was having revival meeting, and it was an amazing thing. And you get in those situations like that. You remember a couple years ago they talked about a revival going on down in one of the Carolinas, and it just kept on going, and it kept on. People come back. It was a full place. I mean, it full every night, and more people would come back because God was moving on their hearts, and things was happening. And you never want them to end. But let me give you the reality. They do. We live here on earth still. And as you read the Bible, you kind of get envious of Moses, because Moses had some experiences with God that probably no one else will ever had. And one time he come down off the mountain, and they had to cover his face. Now, there's different opinions on that. Some covered his face because it was shining so bright because he'd been in the presence of God. Others said they covered his face because the fact was he was losing it. As he got away from the presence of God, his glow started going away. And so I don't know what it was, but I'm telling you, he was there. And it would be nice if we could stay on that type of mountaintop. But the reality is life gets in the way and we come down. And most of life is lived in the valley. Most of life is lived down here where things go wrong and problems are here. And we find ourselves in valleys. And so I thought about that, and I don't know. I always want to think that I'm going to preach like 4 or 5 or 6 weeks on something, and then I end up, by the second or third week, I've run out of things to say. So but in my thought, we're going to look at some areas of valleys that we walk through, and valleys that we're in while we're waiting for the next mountaintop to come. And they ought to come. Mountaintops ought to come to God's people. There ought to be times where we get in his presence, and it's just an amazing thing. But I've got a valley I want to read about in 2 Chronicles today. I'm going to call it a valley of crisis, and you could probably call it a lot of things, but mainly it's a valley. But all of us have been there, or many of us have been there at one time or another. Something's come along, and we would count at this. And on this account, it takes place in a valley of, don't even know if I'm saying it right. I think it's Baraka, but it's located, if you look at a Bible map, between Hebron and Jerusalem, and there in 2 Chronicles chapter 20, I'll read a few verses and then we'll talk about some of it. But in verse number 1 says, it came to pass after this also that the children of Moab and the children of Ammon, and with them other beside the Ammonites, came against Jehoshaphat to battle. Then there came some that told Jehoshaphat, saying, there cometh a great multitude against thee from beyond the sea on this side of Syria, and behold, they be in, now think about that word right there, Hazatomer, which is Engedi. And Jehoshaphat feared, and set himself to seek the Lord, and proclaimed a fast throughout all Judah. And Judah gathered themselves together to ask help of the Lord, even out of all the cities of Judah that came to seek the Lord. Then drop down to verse number 17, and this is the Lord speaking to them now. This is what's happening now. And down in verse 17, they know these people's coming. There's going to be a battle. Verse 17 says, ye shall not need to fight in this battle. Set yourselves, stand ye still, and see the salvation of the Lord with you, O Judah and Jerusalem. Fear not, nor be dismayed. Tomorrow, go out against them, for the Lord will be with you. So here's sort of what's going on now. This, if you look it up in the time period, it happened around 430 BC. And Jehoshaphat is the king here. You read about him, and I think Jehoshaphat was a good king. He made mistakes. He did some things he shouldn't have done, but he was a good king. But it does not look to me like in this story that Jehoshaphat was the reason for the crisis. It seems like he found himself in a valley of crisis, or in a crisis situation that just kind of got dropped in his lap. He didn't do anything. He wasn't in the wrong. And if we're honest about it, I say it that way because some of our valleys, sometimes they're our own. And since these people are not part of our church anymore, I won't give you their names, but I'll just say we had a family here a few years back, and it seemed like every week when they come in, she would come to my office, or she would come here, and she would begin telling me about all the different things going on and how miserable life was and all this. And most of it she brought on herself. And that's one of the reasons they're not here, because she told me one day, she said, you blame it all on me. I said, no, but you got a good chunk of it. And that didn't go over well. But she would make poor decisions and do things, and she would call people and call them names and do all kinds of things, and then she'd be upset because they got mad at her. How do you expect? She would call her kids and her in-laws things that I'd never heard of, and then they would get mad, wouldn't come see her, and then she'd come, and it was in a crisis. I said, well, you wouldn't come see me either if you did that. And but sometimes we make our own crisis. Sometimes we put ourselves in those valleys, but sometimes they just they just happen. Maybe because of people we know, maybe because of friends we have, maybe because of a church we go to, and this just came upon the king. It wasn't like Jehoshaphat was out looking to pick a fight with these Moabites and all these people. And that is the crisis. Here, the Moabites and the Ammonites and some others, I don't know, probably several other ites in through there. Their form, it says, they come and told him, hey, there's a multitude coming. There's a bunch of them. And they're in Engedi, it says. Now, again, if you look that up on the map, that's about 50 miles from Jerusalem. And he's around that area. So it's about 3 days away marching. And that's what they're doing. So the crisis has started. My thought is, we're looking at valleys tonight. I like to talk about what to do when you're on the mountaintop, but instead I want to look about what to do in the valleys here. What do we do? Well, when I'm in a valley of crisis, I need to learn to pray instead of panic. Because usually what happens is my physical body, my old man says, you're in a mess. You're destroyed. And the new man, the part of me that when I got saved and God moved in, the new spirit is saying, just take it to God and pray about things. But many times we don't do that. And here's what happened in verse number 3. It says, and Jehoshaphat feared and set himself to seek the Lord. Now I like this because sometimes I talk to people, they don't think the Bible's, that's just an old book that somebody wrote, a good story. No, the Bible's real as anything that you know today. And it tells the truth about people. It doesn't paint Jehoshaphat here as some super warrior king. What happened? Somebody told him, they said, Jehoshaphat, all these multitudes of people, they're coming after you. And he got afraid. You know what I'd do if I found out a multitude of people has come down here to queue not to whoop me? I'd go over to Brother Price's house. And yeah, I'd be afraid. So I'd go over there. Maybe I can outrun him, so they'd whoop him and while I'm running, see? But I'm saying that that's what we would do. We'd be afraid. We get afraid. And think about this. If you're at home and you got a policeman calls you and he tells you one of your kids has been in a bad wreck, but that's all the information we can give you now. What do? Let's go ahead and finish supper. Everything's all right. No, you get afraid. It happens. That's who we are. Our first response is fear. And I've always heard this when the fear factor kicks in, one of two things happens. Either you fight, or there's either fight or there's flight. You run or you fight. Well, look at what Jehoshaphat did. He set himself to seek God. You see, I feel like in the world you really only have those two options. People that don't know Christ, their two responses is when they're faced with fear, they stand and fight it, or they just run. They flight. I'm trying to make it rhyme there, but they're just gone. But a Christian, someone who knows the Lord, someone who's been saved, they've given their heart to God, we got a third response of potential. Now, we don't do it a lot of times, but it's there. And that is we can set ourselves to seeking God. It's still a valley. It's still a time of fear. But how do you get there? How do you get where Jehoshaphat? Again, my thought is when I find myself in that valley, I need to learn to pray instead of panic. I'm not saying you don't get afraid, but you can be afraid without panicking. It's possible to do that. I used to tell my mom she was the worst. If things happen, I said, be honest with you, I said, I hope none of my kids are ever at your house and have an accident. Because she would panic and she could do nothing. I remember one day we was putting up hay and we'd just come back home and we pulled up in the driveway, and as we did, I looked out on the porch and my mom was running back and forth just screaming and doing this, and what had happened is a big limb had fallen out of the tree, and then my sister-in-law was sitting in a chair underneath that tree, and it hit her right just straight on, and there she laid on the ground, and Mom standing up on the porch running back and forth. So we got an ambulance and we got everything taken care of, and I told her later after she got settled down, I said, if we hadn't come home, were you just going to run up and down the porch all day and let her lay out there and die? I said, you got to be able to react. And so, yeah, you have fear, and but you have to be able to do some things. And so, how do you get to that place where Jehoshaphat, where your response is, I'm going to set myself to seek God? Troubles come, I get in the valley, things happen. How do we do that? Well, I'm just reading this story about Jehoshaphat. It seems to me like the way he learned was he went through a lot of valleys before this. I hate to say it, but a lot of times the things that we learn, that you know when you get older, is because you've been through several things as you're growing. And it'd be nice if we could just the best way to learn things, I think, is to learn from someone else. For instance, growing up, I tell this often, but my brother and my sister, boy, they got in a lot of trouble. Now, my oldest brother, he was 11 years older than me, so I don't know what kind of trouble he got in. He was done gone before I was old enough to figure out what was going on. But my brother, 3 years older than me, and my sister, 7 years older than me, they was always getting in trouble. And I would watch what they was doing, and I thought, that's pathetic. Yeah, I'm going to do better than that. I may do the same things, but I'm going to be better at it. I'm not going to get caught, I guess you could say. And so you learn from what other people do. And I think Jehoshaphat here, I think he learned from himself. I think and we're not going to turn and read it, but back in chapter 18 of here, 2 Chronicles, he goes to battle with King Ahab. Now, Ahab was the worst king Israel ever had. He was the most wicked. Jehoshaphat was a godly king. A good thing for Jehoshaphat to do when Ahab comes and said, let's go to battle and fight these people, he should have said, no, you got a bad name and you don't care for the things of God, and I just don't think we're going to work together. But he didn't do that. He said, I don't remember how, he made a statement, something about if it's your battle, it's my battle, or something like that, and they went to battle. And Ahab, of course, not only was he taking someone, he got Jehoshaphat going, but Ahab was scared that someone was going to try to kill him. And he knew what was going on, so he said, hey, you make sure you wear all your kingly robes and everything. My kingly robes, Ahab's robes is what he put on him. And Ahab said, I'm going to dress up. Yeah, he dressed up like a soldier, and because he already knew that the other army, they were only coming after the king. They was just, we're going to kill the king. We want Ahab, we're going to kill him. So he went out looking like somebody else. And you read the story back there, and probably some of you say, preacher, it'd been faster if we would have read it. But if you read the story, I like stories like that. I like reading how things happen in the Bible. And so they catch up with Jehoshaphat, and he got afraid again. He hollered out, hey, don't shoot me, I'm not Ahab. And I don't know what he said. It doesn't say that in the Bible, but I'm telling you, he got scared. And then people realized it, and they turned and took off. God took a hold of him and said, get away from him, leave him alone. God took care of Jehoshaphat. And then if you go ahead and read it, I'm going to see if I can find it. It's not there. I knew I wouldn't find it. But if you read the story, somebody just pulls an arrow and shoots. Guess who gets it? Good old Ahab gets it. He thought he was hiding by getting disguised and all that. No, he got killed right there, and he come home. So when the battle ended, here's my thought. Jehoshaphat went with a king he shouldn't have went with. He let the king trick him into wearing his stuff and all that. And when the battle's over, they got whooped. It wasn't a good battle. They didn't do any good, and Ahab's dead. And so he learned some things there. That wasn't a very smart decision. I was in a valley, I was in a place, and I made bad decisions. Then in chapter 19, he comes back home and says he's safe and things are good, and what happens? The preacher comes down. The Lord puts a little word in the preacher's ear, and he goes down and starts telling him, say, listen, what are you doing running around with ungodly people? And you shouldn't be with them in the first place, and you shouldn't. And he said, because of that, the wrath of God is on you for your actions. So now, okay, now I'm in trouble because but the preacher's after me because I made wrong decisions. And now we're in chapter number 20, and now all of a sudden the Moabites and all these other people's after him. And what's his response? I'm not going to mess up this time. I'm going to go straight to God. I'm going to do this different. Where did he learn that? From those other things he didn't do so well. And do you not do that? Some of the best ways to learn something is to mess it up the first time, then you'll do better the next time. And that's what he did. And I'm not saying we should try to mess things up so that we can learn better. It'd be nice if we could get things right the first time and if we'd learn to seek God. But what if we could? What if we could learn to seek God in our valleys, in our times of crisis? Wouldn't it be a big game changer for us a lot of times? It's amazing to me how many people seem to be faithful, seem to be following God, and then troubles come, and they bail on God. When do you need God more? When you got troubles. And why would you bail on him then? But that's what people do. But what if if we took fight and we took flight out of the picture and replaced it all with troubles come, I'm going straight to God? I wonder how much difference that would make in our lives. I wonder how much difference it'd make in our church. I wonder how much difference it'd make in our good old U.S. of A. if we'd ever learned that. Now, we're not going to learn it as a country, as a nation. I understand that, but it'd be nice if we did. It'd be nice if we could be like that again. The Apostle Paul understood it. He says this, be careful. What's that mean? Don't worry about anything. Be careful for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving. Now, notice how he says that. By prayer, supplication, with thanksgiving. He's given thanksgiving. He's not got the answers to the prayer yet. You don't have to wait the answers to prayer to thank God for what he's going to do. And Paul says, with prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. So Jehoshaphat made it to the place, and Paul got to the place, and you and I need to get to the place where when we get into a valleys and we get into crisis, our first response, we go straight to God. Just take it to God. That brings my second thought. When I'm in those valleys, I need to back up my words with some serious action. Lip service is not enough. Look in verse 3. We read, it said that he, well, I've lost verse 3, so I'm going to have to find it again. Verse 3 says, he feared and set himself to seek the Lord. Then the last part it says, and proclaimed a fast throughout all Judah. And verse 4 says, and Judah gathered themselves together to ask help of the Lord. Even out of all the cities of Judah, they came to seek the Lord. If I was to try to describe Christians today, the majority of Christians today, I would say we're lip service Christians. We say things. But I'll give you an example. We mentioned just a little bit ago, Brother Pitts is dealing with cancer, and Brother Tom Madden, they're both battling cancer. And we've asked for prayer. And many of us here in this room tonight will pray for them tonight. What about tomorrow? What about the day after? What about Saturday? Will we even remember that? You see, for many people, and for many who are not over here tonight, they may not pray at all for them this week. But for many, this will be the last prayer we offer for these people this week. What is that? Well, I call it the one and done approach. Now, there are a lot of people that tell you that's the way you're supposed to pray. There are people I know that say you pray about something, you should never pray about it again. I don't find that in the Bible. I don't believe that to be true. And it'd be like me, if I go to the bank and I need a loan, if I go and I can't get a loan, well, then I'm going to keep working. Now, if I go and he okays it, there's no sense in me going back and asking him for a loan. I've already got it. And so if I go to God and I pray and God answers that prayer, or God gives me the assurance that it's taken care of, then I'm not going to pray about it again. But if I don't know how God's going to do it, I'm going to keep talking to him about it, and I'm going to let him know it's still on my heart. And the prayers that make the difference, and you'll find several stories in the Bible, are persistent prayers. I call it, we just knock on heaven's door every day. We just talk to God. Now again, it's not that God ignores us, but God wants us to come to him. He wants us to talk to him. And the Bible tells us that we're to keep praying and keep seeking and keep asking and keep knocking. And I like to think of it this way: when the kids is little, when the kids would come up, they ask you for something. Well, if you walk in a store with kids, the first thing they run into, they want it. And you walk 2 aisles away, they've already forgot what they wanted back then. They didn't really want it. It was just a spur of the moment. But when they ask you for something on Monday, and you're not at the store, and they ask you for it on Tuesday, and they ask you for it on Wednesday, I mean, there's a difference. You can tell the difference. There's one of them, they've requested something, and the other one, they're really putting some weight behind their request. Well, Jehoshaphat, he's putting some weight behind his request. He didn't just pray. He didn't just say, well, I hope God takes care of this. And when it says that he went to seek God, he got everybody in on it. Him and the rest of Judah, they fasted. They came together. It says they all sought the Lord. He put some power behind that. He put some emphasis on it. And so now, if I could describe it this way, it's not really the way it is, but it kind of helps us think. It's not just a little tap there on heaven's door. I mean, it's a good-sized knock. God knows there's people that's doing, and I tell people this often, if you got a prayer request, you can ask 2 or 3 people to pray for you, and God will hear those prayers. But what do you reckon happens when 2,000 or 3,000 people's praying? The Lord already knows, but it helps us to understand. And I can't explain it because God knows everything ahead of time. But the fact is, it's an emphasis, and I think I just think it's more effective. I can't give you all kinds of quotes on that to why it is, but I think this is sometimes where small churches are missing it more so than big churches. Big churches, a lot of times there's so many people, they don't know each other. But we're not big. We ought to know everybody in here. Might not know everybody's first name, and that's probably because I can't remember anybody's name. But you ought to know people. As soon as you see them, yeah, I know something about them. And we've got, in my mind, we have so much potential to really knock at heaven's door for each other, because we know each other. We know what's going on, instead of just tapping. I mean, we got the opportunity. There's things going on in people's lives in our church. We ought to be praying for them. And because we're small, we know each other, and we probably know, even if it's not a person here and it's somebody we know who they're asking us to pray for. It might be a cousin, might be an uncle, might be somebody, unless it's Brother Rance's family, because he's got so many family, we can't know them all. But everybody else we ought to know, and so we can pray for them. And it's not like we're praying for people that we don't know. But if we could put some serious action behind our prayers, like if everybody in the church was praying for somebody on a daily basis, and maybe even some of the church says, you know what, on Thursday, I'm just going to take Thursday and I'm going to fast and pray. Now, a lot of people think fasting, you just quit eating. No, if you're not going to spend time with God praying, then fasting is not doing nothing but helping you lose some weight. But fasting, you can see some things happen. God works through fasting a lot, and I can't explain that either. You just have to do it. But if you don't have time and you're not going to get alone with God, if you're going to fast and go out and work on your truck all day, you probably just be well off not to fast. You'll probably pass out after a while, in fact. So, but fasting, it needs to be coupled with prayer and time with God, or we can just continue lip service, one and done. We pray Wednesday night, we're done. We put a prayer list up, we don't go back, we don't think about people. I hope you don't do that. I hope you pray for folks. And you might not know everybody's name, but you can describe to God, he'll know who you're talking about. And you can tell him things going on. And this area of our church, these young people here need some help, and different things. We can take that to God. And so I think that the valley teaches us that there's times we need to step up our game. And we need to put some serious actions to our words. And when you're in that valley, those are one of those times that you need to put some, and Jehoshaphat, he did. So my thought is, when I'm in the valley, I need to pray and not panic. And then I need to back up my words with some action. I need to get in, show that my heart's into something, not just say it. And then the third thing I would say, I need to make God's way out of this valley my first choice. Now, the truth is, not every valley is made to get out. I think that's the way we pray sometimes, and as soon as I get in trouble, I know I pray this way, but as soon as things are going, something's wrong, something I don't like, first thing I ask the Lord to do is get me out of that, change that. Well, sometimes maybe what I ought to do is, Lord, help me to get through this and learn some things from it. Help me to get through to the other side, to finish through with this. And if I get sick, Lord, get me out of sickness. Well, no, help me to do well in this sickness. Help me to honor you in this sickness. And so, but the fact is, the way out is not my way; it's God's way. And if you look there in verse 17, it says, "Ye shall not need." I like this. He says, "You shall not need to fight in this battle." Can you imagine? You got all kinds of people coming at you, and horses and chariots, and you know you're outnumbered, and everything's not looking good. And then you're talking to the Lord. He said, "By the way, you don't need to fight. He said, all I need you to do," says, "set yourselves, stand ye still, and see the salvation of the Lord with you, O Judah and Jerusalem. Fear not, nor be dismayed. Tomorrow go out against them, for the Lord will be with you." Now again, he's telling just come out and watch it. Just come out and watch what I'm going to do. Now I know here's what we do sometimes. We're tough. You get things go wrong, and here's one of the first things goes through my mind, and I know it does, and so it surely happens to somebody else. But first thing is, I can handle this. I'll get myself out of this mess. But you know what? I rarely do. I rarely get myself out of the mess when I'm in a mess, and I just need to. And in fact, a lot of times when I try that, I get myself in a bigger mess, much bigger than if I'd just called on God in the first place. And we all do that. But again, I think these valleys are there to teach us to call on God as our first line of defense. Let him say that. And I love the fact that Jehoshaphat here, before he did anything else, he called on God. He didn't go out and say, "Hey, how many men have we got old enough?" I don't know how old you got to be drafted in our army, though. How many men 18 and older can we draft to get in the army? How many men have we got in the army already? How's the military? Is it ready? Are they ready to go? Because we got a big battle coming. He didn't ask any questions like that. Didn't talk to anything. Instead, he went to God, and God told him, said, hey, this battle's not even yours. This is mine. How they say it, this is on me. That's what the Lord told him. This is on me, and I just want you to take all the people and go out there and watch. Now, I kind of like battles like that. I kind of like watching God do things. And what Jehoshaphat do? He took God at his word. How do I know? If you read the rest of the story, it's hilarious. Because he went out to the battle, and in the front line, he sent the choir. He put the choir up front. The singers were up front. Who goes to battle and puts singers up in the front? Now, if you watch a good Western, you'll see that whenever you're getting ready to fight, you sneak up on people. You don't want them to know where you're at. You don't send your choir out there singing so everybody can find you, but that's what he did. They're out there singing, and they're not being secretive. You see, if God's fighting your battle, who cares if the enemy knows where you're at? You're not fighting anyhow. God's going to take care of them. And so he puts the singers out there, and the singers are leading the way, and they get to the battlefield, and what do they find out? I don't know if their singing was that bad or what, but them folks turned and fought each other. And there wasn't nothing to do, just collect the rewards. They done got whooped, and they hadn't even did any fighting. So maybe they're singing. Maybe that's why God told him to let the singers go first. I don't know, but the fact is, we need to learn when in times of crisis, do it God's way. Let's if we're going to get out of this valley, let's do it the way God says. And Jehoshaphat learned that his valley of crisis can become a valley of blessing. Here's what it says in verse 26. And on the fourth day, they assembled themselves in the valley of Barakah. But there they blessed the Lord. Therefore, the name of the same place was called the Valley of Barakah unto this day. A big crisis became a big blessing. It can in our life. I think if you'd asked Jehoshaphat, he would have said, boy, I'm glad this happened. No, he probably wasn't glad. But it was all over. He's glad he trusted God, and glad he went to God. So he turned his crisis into a blessing. How did he do it? First of all, by seeking God before anything else. Then putting something, a little substance behind his seeking God. Not just saying, Lord, take care of this, and then forgetting about it. That won't work. He put something behind it. He did some fasting. He did some praying, a lot of praying, and got the people involved. And then he followed God's way. He did from the start. He did the way God said. I doubt that Jehoshaphat, I doubt it was his idea. Man, if we could just get a good bunch of singers and send them out here, I think we can win this battle. I don't think that was his idea. I think that's what the Lord told him. So we need to learn to do those same things in our valleys. If you've not had a valley yet, then you're pretty young because there's a lot of them out there. Most of life is not on a mountaintop. It would be nice if it was, but it's not. Most of life is in the valley, and we need to learn to turn those valleys over to God. Now, I thank you for being here tonight, and again, we appreciate everybody being part of our service. And we've got a prayer list. If you'll just sit there in your seat or kneel there by your seat, however you want to do it, but you want to spend a little time praying over part of that list. You can pray over all of it if you want, but I'll probably have the lights turned out on you and be running the bus route before you get done praying. But if we've numbered it for that, so you can pray over part of it. But do pray. Do take this prayer list, as I mentioned tonight. Take it with you and add to it. Put some things on there for yourself. And I actually still use our old phone directories of our church, and I add to them. And that's how I try to pray for folks in the church, because if I just sit down and try to remember everybody's name, I'll forget everybody. And so I take phone lists and different things, and I pray. And if I know a certain situation, like Sister Diane, I prayed for her today that I couldn't remember if it was today or yesterday. I was afraid for some reason. I guess this is Wednesday. I guess I did know it was today, but in my mind this was Thursday, and so I was praying because I thought she went yesterday. So I get my days mixed up. But pray for folks, and it's not us that gets things done, but God wants to hear from us. So let's spend time praying. And if you got some time now, let's go to prayer tonight. And thank you again for being part of our service.